So, India just enacted its biggest labor reform in decades. Four new codes replacing 29 old laws now govern close to 5 million workers, from factory floors to gig platforms. Basic wages must now be 50% of total compensation. Women can work night shifts with safety guarantees. Companies can now lay off workers without government permission if they have fewer than 300 employees. Previously, this limit was 100. And gig workers get statutory recognition for the first time, though actual benefits remain unclear. The promise? Simpler compliance, broader protections, faster growth. The concern? Weaker job security, state level variations, and implementation chaos. So, are we witnessing a watershed moment for workers' rights? Or do these rules come at higher costs on two counts: compliance for employers and security for employees? Listen on as we analyze various aspects of the new codes with a labor law expert, the founder of a startup that engages women gig workers, and India's Labor and Employment Secretary. It's Friday, November 28th. I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. Let's start with a top-level explanation from an employment law expert, Poorvi Chothani of LawQuest.
One very good thing that has happened is that there were 29 laws that affected workers, laborers, industries, etc. And these have all now been consolidated into four codes. We had a lot of discrepancy in the definition of terms like who's a workman, who's the contract worker, etc. So this has all been clarified now. The other big change is that they have recognized work formats like gig workers and platform workers, etc., and have sought to recognize them, and hopefully we are going to see social security benefits for them as well. Just now the law says that there will be social security benefits, but we don't have any meat on the bones as yet. One thing that the government cannot do is consolidate and make central rules under this, because employment law is on the concurrent list. That means that the central and the state governments have the power over this. So, what the central government can do is give the broad framework, which it has done by the new codes, but the implementation of it will have to be as per the state rules. And that, according to me, is going to give us still a checkered board across the country. So that anomaly or that challenge will continue for employers who have got locations across the country. It also will affect employers who may have a location at one city or one location in India, but they have remote workers at different locations, because then they have to comply with both the state laws. So we've got to still deal with that, but by and large, it's created consolidation, which is a good thing.
So, Purvi, how will the new labor codes impact salaries, layoffs, and compliance for both employees and employers?
So, Anirban, there are two, three things. One is that they have created a more stringent way in determining what is basic pay and what are going to be the added allowances. This is good for employees, because earlier companies would break up a lot of their salary or a large amount of their salary into basic salary and the perks. The perks were not then subject to gratuity payouts. Now, what they've done is they've said the basic wage has to be 50% of the compensation, and the rest of the 50% can be broken up into allowances, which is a good thing for employees. The other thing is that they have done is they've created flexibility for employers. Earlier, employers which had more than 100 employees in factories were needed to get government approval before they could close their organization or retrench a large number of employees, etc. That was a big challenge, because it's easy to scale up, but it's very difficult to scale down in bad times. This is going to ease up for employers that have up to 300 employees. So it doesn't take away the government approval, approval process completely, but it at least reduces the burden on smaller organizations that have less than 300 employees. And the thing is that now, since there are only four codes, the compliance burden on employers also is consolidated. And they're going to create more and more digital platforms for compliance, for inspection, for audits, etc. So it's going to be very much like what our income tax authorities have done with our income tax filings, where it's become, faceless, it's become more technology driven, etc. So that is something good that's going to come of this consolidation and new rules.
Got it. Understood. Now, if you could double click a little on the gig and platform workers and the social security and benefits, please.
So this is for the first time that there's a statutory recognition of gig workers under Indian labor laws. But as the gig economy grows in the world and in India, this recognition at least helps. Now, whether they're going to get social security benefits or not is yet to be seen. What they've also done is they've created a different class or a different definition for fixed term employees or FTEs. These people are definitely recognized as workers. So earlier, if you just had a 1 year contract or a 2 year contract with an establishment, you were not considered a permanent employee. But now these temporary employees, fixed term employees, will be given the same benefits as permanent employees, which is a very good thing. In addition to that, fixed term employees will be entitled to gratuity. So this is
Mhm.
also a big deal.
Now, talking about small businesses and micro enterprises, what do they need to watch out for with these raised thresholds and exemptions?
So, Anirban, I have not studied the impact on micro enterprises. I've just done a broad stroke analysis so far because I think the real impact or the real nitty gritties are going to depend on the state rules that will come soon, hopefully. They do have to give them 3 months pre notice salary and then the notice salary, etc. So, there is some burden on the employers, but at least they don't have to wait for the onerous government approval process.
Understood. And can I ask you to explain a little bit about the state level variations and what challenges would that give rise to when it comes to implementation?
So, for example, employment state insurance benefits, right? So, workmen are supposed to get insurance to protect them against injuries at the workplace, etc. Now, this is a pure state subject. So, because it's the employee state insurance. So, we're going to see how are they going to come out with that. Then also, we're going to see a variation in holidays because states determine what holidays they want to give the employees.
Right.
Statutory, of course, they'll have to give, but sometimes they're very often they're able to choose because we have so many national holidays they're able to choose. There will be variations on other levels as well. And the Shops and Establishment Acts also will get impacted because the Shops and Establishment Acts determine a lot of these things that are discussed. What are the working hours? What are the holidays, etc. So I think that there should be a spate of modifications in those as well. We are waiting and watching this space.
And finally, Purvi, some advice to businesses and workers to best prepare for this transition and what measures could improve the new system going forward.
So the businesses should do a wage structure audit at the moment to see that they're not going to have a very negative impact when we go into the 50% basic wage regime.
Mm.
Because these codes have been announced, etc., but they're still not effective until we have the notification. So we're still in a limbo period. And this is the time when companies can sort of do internal audits and get their ducks in a row. For employees, I would say that they must understand their rights. They must understand what is minimum wages, overtime, social security, etc. They must track their provident fund accounts, their ESI benefits, their gratuity contributions, and they should see that when they're transitioning from the old regime to the new regime, they are not disadvantaged. And they can demand from the employers clarity on classification, benefits, etc. The companies, on the other hand, should have updated contracts, appointment letters, HR policies, standing orders, because there are under the broader central laws, you also have standing orders, and these will have an impact. And the state dependency and contractor compliance audits also, because contract workers are still treated differently. And that still continues. And contract workers have not been given any additional benefit. They're not going to get social security or any PF or ESI benefits from the end employer. Whatever they get, they're supposed to get from their direct employer, which is the contracting company. They should be aware of government gig worker welfare schemes, because I believe that they're going to announce something in this. And there is also some mention of employer contributions to a social security regime. Companies should also start building their own digital compliance capabilities, because when they have to comply on a digital platform, they will need to also be prepared with data in a digital format so that the compliance becomes easy and error free. They should train HR teams, make sure that employees are not misclassified, an internal audit and streamlining titles, salaries, etc., to make sure that the transition is compliant with the new regime, I think is critical.
Next, I asked one important stakeholder what the impact of the new labor codes would be for gig workers, especially women. Here's Anjali Sardana, the founder of Pronto, an online marketplace for home services.
I'm very excited by the new regulation. For us, this doesn't affect us too much in the sense of, everything that it kind of asks are things that we either already do or we're planning to do. Right. And so like these are things that we're happy to do. I think for us, ultimately we're solving for partner experience and partner NPS, and all of these things kind of build towards that. So these are table stakes for us. But it makes me very happy to see this regulation. And I hope that this regulation does kind of move the needle in the offline world as well, and on other platforms.
And Anjali, are you making the professionals or the gig workers that are part of your platform aware of the new rights that they have thanks to these labor codes?
Yeah, so we are planning sessions in our hubs. So we have a supply strategy team who works on kind of partner experience, and they're putting together an education module on the regulation and kind of how it affects them and making them aware of their rights. And so we are working on kind of rolling that module out across all of our hubs.
Now, there are deeper questions that companies and workers are asking. Are the new labor codes too business friendly at the expense of worker protections? When will gig workers actually receive the promised social security benefits? Will different state rules create a compliance nightmare for employers operating across India? What will fixed term employment really do? Does raising the retrenchment threshold from 100 to 300 employees weaken job security? My colleague Deepshikha Sikarwar, National Editor Economics, and Yogima Seth Sharma, who tracks the Labour Ministry, sat down with the Labour and Employment Secretary Vandana Gurnani to have these and more questions answered. First up, are the rules really finalized?
So, as far as the rules in the central domain are concerned, our rules have been ready. As you know, they were pre-published also. Comments were taken and they were considered. In fact, we have got a huge number of comments, 4,000 plus comments from about 470 people. And that's how the rules are finalized. However, the legal requirement for us is that the rules have to be once again pre-published after the codes become effective, which means we would give 45 days time for people to give their comments. And then we would take another few days, or 30 days or maximum 45 days, to finalize the rules. So you can expect that over the course of the next 2.5 to 3 months, the final rules in the central domain would be published. We've also had consultation with the states, and yesterday we had a meeting with them also, and we have sensitized them about the codes. The states will also consult their respective law departments and take this process forward.
Now, some employers, especially exporters, have raised concerns about additional costs like overtime charges, health checkups, etc. Secretary Gurnani starts by clarifying there will be, in fact, a huge reduction in compliance expenses.
There has been huge compliance reduction in the courts. The compliance reduction is happening because the number of rules and sections have become one third from the past. Returns which were 31 have become one. There is single registration, there is single license pan India, there is a single return that they have to file. There is huge amount of decriminalization that is going to take place. Compounding provisions have been brought in. There is improvement notice instead of straightaway a prosecution. There would also be digital mechanisms to file these compliances, unlike the manual methods earlier. There are also huge costs of litigation because when the law is fragmented, when the definitions are not uniform across the acts, there was a lot of room for litigation. So litigation costs of filing these compliances, because it's going to be made simple, costs of say hiring say chartered accountants or lawyers to do it, those costs are going to go down. And therefore the ability to set up a business is going to be, or to carry on the business is going to be much easier, and those costs are going to go down. The cost of overtime was always there. Overtime was there previously also. Overtime is there now also. But what is different now is, one is the number of working hours has been made flexible. The number of overtime hours permissible has also been increased from 75 to 144, and the appropriate governments can even further enhance it if it is needed. So that meets the request of the industry, that when they have peak kind of demands the worker or peak orders that they get, they would be able to get the kind of hours they need. It also provides for fixed term employment, where they can take it for a fixed period of time. Now, the cost annual health checkup that you were talking about, I would say that this should not be looked at as a cost. In my view, it is an investment in human capital. If you have a healthy workforce, your absenteeism is low, your productivity is higher. For the workers, their out of pocket expenditures on health become low. Also, in certain workplaces, there could be occupational health and safety considerations. Those get picked up earlier because you're having an annual health checkup, and therefore those can lead to corrective measures in terms of making sure that the right kind of processes, safety, etc., are adopted. And I think any such increases in costs would be offset by the huge reductions in the costs of compliance that is going to be brought about by the courts. There is some apprehensions in the labor unions, are codes being too business friendly or codes not being so friendly for the workers. How are you sort of trying to engage with them and so on? In terms of the engagement, as you would know, that the formulation of the codes, Rasdina, exercise which started several years back. There have been many, many consultations which have taken place with the workers and the unions. Totally, in terms of the data that we pulled out, 41 consultations have taken place with the workers' unions when the codes were being formulated. Totally 99, out of which 41 were with the workers, rest were with the state governments and other stakeholders. In terms of message, I would like to be very, very categorical that when you read the codes carefully, they are a big, big improvement over the previous acts in terms of everything to do with a worker's wage, a worker's social security, and a worker's occupational health and safety, all three aspects. When you look at the wage and the payment, the first thing is mandatory appointment letters. Now, this brings in complete transparency. Earlier, there used to be a lot of litigations, and people were not even aware of what are their terms and conditions. A mandatory appointment letter is going to take care of that. The second is minimum wage, which has been made universal. Previously, the minimum wage was applicable to only the employments in the schedule, which would be covering about 30 to 35% of the workforce. Now, every single establishment across the country must have a minimum wage. So, this is a big, huge expansion in terms of ensuring that everybody gets a minimum wage. Third is timely payment of wages. So, the time has been fixed. If it's a daily worker, they must get it at the end of the day. If it's a monthly worker, within 7 days of the month. So that has been kind of said, the timely payment. Gender discrimination, the change now is that apart from equal wages for equal work for men and women, transgender has also been added.
Now, the labor codes really emphasize on social security. How? Here's Secretary Gurnani.
The social security, which was earlier limited to the formal organized workforce, will now be available to unorganized workers and gig and platform workers. So the codes have made a provision that social security would be made universal and across the board, because we've always been having this problem that our EPFO, ESIC, and various social securities are largely in the formal sector. Gig and platform workers were not even recognized, so now there is a definition for them, there is social security for them. The third is I'd like to talk about the occupational safety and health standards. Now, these have also been universalized. It was earlier only limited to certain settings like factories and plantations and mines, etc. Now occupational safety and health is going to be universal in all workplaces. And the codes very clearly define thresholds that if a establishment has X number of workers, it should have so many restrooms, canteens, facilities, etc. So that has been very, very clearly defined in the codes. Standards is an important point because safety standards are important. Now, safety standards were earlier left to each and every state to decide and define. Now, the safety standards will be decided nationally. We'll be consulting the states, but nationally, these standards will be fixed and these will be applicable across the board to all the establishments.
What about employee state insurance corporation benefits?
Even ESIC has been made mandatory for an establishment where there is a hazardous process, even if it has one worker. Because ESIC threshold is 10 workers. So below 10 is voluntary. Currently, they did not have the option to be voluntary members. That has been provided for. But if there is even one worker and there is a hazardous process, it has been made mandatory.
One of the biggest changes in the new codes is the introduction of fixed term employment, where workers on temporary contracts now get the same benefits as permanent employees, including gratuity. But critics worry this flexibility could lead employees to replace stable jobs with short term contracts. Here's Gurnani.
In fixed term employment, when we say that the employers have the flexibility to take people for a fixed term, it's positioned as trying to replace a project based work or seasonal work, which was earlier done through a contractor by doing it directly by the company with the concerned employee. Now, what it does for the employee, there are two things. One is that obviously it brings them at par with permanent employees in terms of benefits of leave, maternity, also gratuity if they complete 1 year. But it also, in a way, meets the aspirations because most employees would like to work directly with the company. It also improves their employability because it comes on their biodata and CV that they have directly worked with the company. So it also meets that kind of a requirement of being able to get the next job. And is, I would say, suitable to a growing economy, suitable to an economy where the world of work is rapidly changing, where the youth are increasingly mobile and want to be getting different kinds of experiences.
Like I said, the retrenchment threshold has been increased from 100 to 300 employees. What will be the impact of this?
Even this threshold of 100 to 300, what we hope would promote formalization because for the retrenchment, closure, and layoff, when there is a 100 limit, what would normally happen is that a number of industries would keep less than 100 workers on their rolls and beyond 100 on contract. Now this 100 has been enhanced to 300. So at least to that extent, as companies get larger, they would be able to keep all the 300 on their rolls without having to go through the contractor. So which is again a huge push for formalization and people directly working with the company.
So the fear is that you have given them flexibility on hire empire, thus they are perceiving it as an increase in cost of manpower. Can that lead to decrease in hiring over a period of time?
See, the fixed term employment is not meant to replace a regular employment or the permanent employment that the companies have. The fixed term employment is positioned as replacing the requirement for a sudden peak of requirement, for a seasonal employment, for a project based employment, because that flexibility is needed. Businesses move from project to project. They may need some export services for a particular kind of a duration. So this is completely positioned and envisaged as something which gives company the flexibility to be able to hire people directly instead of going through a contractor. And as I explained, for the workers, there are these other benefits like gratuity, maternity leave, etc. Now, the provisions which were there in the earlier codes, which ask for a notice to be given when somebody has to, which is for the regular employees and not for the FT. For the regular employees, the notice has to be given, the 15 days of compensation for every completed year of service to be given, gratuity. All those provisions are intact.
Okay, so what changes?
The only thing that has changed is that earlier, after 100, they have to take government permission to close.
Yes.
Now, they have to take that permission when the workers are beyond 300. But for an individual worker, the individual worker is supposed to get all the benefits, which is First of all, a notice period has to be there. Then all the compensation benefits have to be provided for. All that is unchanged. In fact, there is an additional compensation by way of a reskilling fund. Another 15 days of salary has to be put in a reskilling fund so that in case a company closes down and people are laid off, then there is a reskilling fund through which the reskilling also can be funded. So that's in fact an additional provision. We are not becoming the US where today you come to work and you are said tomorrow, told tomorrow you are not coming. No.
So some of the states already had implemented or already had these provisions in place, like, night shifts. Large number of states had already done that. So now with this notification from center, what difference would that make?
So there are about, I would say, 9, 10 provisions which the states had identified and which they were going ahead with. And some states had done it, some had not done it. But there is a vast majority of the good in the codes which had not been still done. Okay. Including the universalization of minimum wages, universalization of social security, the compliance reduction in terms of registration, license, etc. Those have still not been done. What has largely been done is women employment has been done. Fixed term employment in some states has been done. Working hour flexibility has been done in some of the states.
Okay, and what about the confusion on wages? How does the new wage structure work in practice? Who exactly will fix and revise the national floor wages? And are there confusions or overlaps between the central floor wage and state level minimum wages? Here's Gurnani.
So on the wages part, there is one concept of floor wage, which was earlier also there. The floor wage earlier was a optional floor wage, where Government of India would declare a floor wage, which is basically a wage below which the minimum wages should not go. Now this floor wage will have a statutory backing. It's a mandatory floor wage. So that is one part. The other is the minimum wages, which are actually notified for different regions of the country for skills and skilled, etc. So that also will be fixed nationally by the wage boards. And by the way, I also wanted to mention to you, not only in the wage boards, but also in the social security boards and all the other boards, one third would be women now. So which was not there earlier. So there equal participation of women in all these boards. And so the minimum wage could be fixed through that mechanism of the national wage board, state wage codes will also fix this and it will be revised based on the DA, the inflation indexing would be done. Now, what the code says is that if these allowances more than 50% of the total package, then that excess over 50% will get added to the definition of wage. So what it essentially does is that the gratuity, maternity benefit, etc., which are linked to the definition of wage, it that goes up. So social security goes up. The process that we are following now, that we will be, pre-publishing the rules and finalizing the rules, they would have that adequate time to be able to shift their payroll system to the newer definition of wage.
So, when will the new provisions for gig workers be implemented?
See, when we speak about the gig and platform workers, what would first need to come into place is a social security board and a fund for the management of this. And then the fund will get the amount from the aggregators and the schemes will be devised, etc. So I don't think one can time it with a financial year. What we plan to do in terms of gig workers is have systems of API with the aggregators so that we can get data on sustained employment because gig workers are very mobile and there would be a requirement of having some kind of sustained gig work. So that once we have that, we'll have that data and we'll have the contributions and then the scheme would roll. So I don't think we can time it just to the financial year. So we would like to start all these things as soon as possible.
As far as we understand, this cost is going to be borne by the aggregator, the social security for gig workers. But there is also a thing ki if this cannot be passed on to the gig workers, then the aggregator may pass it on to the customers. So what is your sense of this?
We've had discussions with aggregators, and aggregators are aware of the provision in the code. The aggregators have not expressed concerns about the 1 to 2% of the turnover and the 5% of the payout as a ceiling. The aggregators were actually looking forward to a national code and national framework because, in the absence of that, different states were drafting their laws. So they prefer a national framework, a national fund, and a national kind of endeavor on this. It is also better for the worker who's able to ensure portability of the benefits. Whatever social security comes is portable across the states.
India's labour codes represent a decisive shift, expanding protections for millions while giving businesses breathing room to scale. But the real test lies ahead. Will states create a unified framework or just a patchwork of conflicting rules? Will gig workers actually see those promised benefits? And can 5 million employees transition smoothly without losing ground? The consolidation is done. Implementation will be key. That's it for today. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi and me, sound design by Rajas Naik. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't miss our new show Corner Office Conversation, where we speak to the most interesting business and thought leaders from India and the world. Featured amongst Apple Podcasts' best shows of 2025, it comes to you every alternate Monday wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, Wednesdays are when ET's stellar tech team talks to young, dynamic tech entrepreneurs and C-suite executives in the series ET in the Valley. Keep listening.